awareness and standing up for women's safety, privacy, and equal opportunities. After Riley's direct experience competing against a man and woman sport, being forced without any warning or consent to undress before the fully intact male and subjected to discrimination by the NCAA, she became one of the most powerful voices to speak out against the injustice, challenging the rules of the NCAA, USA Swimming, International Olympic Committee, and other governing bodies. Here to share her story, please welcome the one and only Riley Gaines.
Really, since being in the state of Utah, I flew in this morning. I have just been overwhelmed with the support and the encouragement that I've received. There are a lot of nice people here in this state. Certainly feel more supported and encouraged than I did not too long ago in San Francisco, which was my first mistake, going to San Francisco. But I went to San Francisco State University to share a very similar message as to what I'm here to talk to you guys about. But I was naive, I guess, to believe that these students and community members would come with an open mind and the willingness to have their hearts softened, because they did not. They came with pitchforks and fire, and upon delivering my message in a similar form, it was like a classroom setting, right? So podium, whiteboard at the back, seats in the audience, a door at the back. Upon delivering my message, a group of protesters rushed in, hundreds of them. They turned off the lights, they rushed to the front, the room was dark, and they ambushed me, totally accosted. I'm being pushed, I'm being shoved, I'm being quite literally punched in the face by these men wearing dresses, which, fortunately for me, their punches really don't hurt that bad. Nonetheless, these protesters ended up holding me for ransom for about 4-5-ish hours, demanding that if I wanted to make it back home to see my family safely again, I had to pay them money. You might be wondering, where were the police? Don't forget, this is San Francisco. So the police were being held for ransom with me. Hour 3 or so in this room, right? I'm looking at the officers. Pretty sure we're being held against our will. Pretty sure we call that kidnapping. Isn't there something you can do? To which they said, no. No, there's nothing we can do. We're not allowed to do anything because we're not allowed to be seen as anything other than an ally to this community, or else we'll lose our jobs. Again, the same community is on the other side of the door, calling these officers racist pigs for protecting a white girl like me. Anyways, the dean of students ends up showing up. It's like midnight, again, the middle of the night, and begins to negotiate with the students how much I owe each of them to be able to leave. I could hear it right out. They barricaded me in this room. I could hear it from under the door, which the price they agreed upon to let me go was $10 each. Which makes me mad, because I think I'm worth more than $10. But anyways, eventually I was able to get out of this room. But the next day, the vice president of student affairs at the university, Dr. Jamila Moore, she sent a university-wide email out. So all professors, all faculty, the entire student body. And in this email, she said, "We are so proud of our brave students for handling Riley Gaines in the manner that they did. We know how deeply traumatic her presence is on this campus, and so here are some counseling resources for you guys. Take the day off of school. Just know that we see you, we hear you, we love you, and we stand with you." Of course, nowhere in this email did it condemn violence against women for that matter. Nowhere in this email did it say that we uphold our First Amendment rights and the freedom of speech. No, of course not. I could spend the rest of my time, truly, describing these, I guess adverse situations, but really almost seemingly comical situations I have found myself in over these past 2 years or so. But again, just to reiterate how excited I am to be in this room with you guys. A little bit about me. As you heard, I recently graduated from the University of Kentucky. I've got my degree in human health sciences and health law. I was in dental school after college, actually set to specialize in endodontics, which is a specialized type of dentist that performs root canals. I'd married my husband, my really cute 6'4" British husband, who now living in Nashville has like this awesome country British accent. It rocks. It would have been really easy for me, really safe, really secure, for me to essentially, ride off into the sunset with the plans that I had made for myself. But I realized that the quickest way to make God laugh in your face is to make plans for yourself, because he very clearly had different plans for me. A little bit about my swimming, my athletic background. Started swimming when I was 4, graduated at 22, so dedicated 18 years of my life to my sport, which I probably don't have to explain that to many of you in the room, right? Athletes, I talk to many of you who are athletes, parents of athletes. You get it. You understand the time, the hours, the dedication, the sacrifices that you have to make to compete at and ultimately be successful at the highest level. I was no different. High school, right, junior year, I started getting recruited for college. I'm really biased. The SEC is the best conference. I'm sorry. But we're letting everyone in nowadays. Texas, Oklahoma, feel free to join. Why not? I'm biased. I knew I was going to stay in the SEC. My dad, he's an SEC Hall of Famer. He played football. My mom played softball. My sister, she played softball. She went to Ole Miss. My brother, he played football. My youngest sister, she's 15. She's an elite level gymnast and, dare I say, probably the best athlete out of all of us. She'll go on to do incredible things. So I knew I was going to stay in the SEC. Admittedly, did not know I was going to go to the University of Kentucky because as a Tennessean, I thought the only things that came from Kentucky were like meth and Mountain Dew. I was interested in neither of those things. I'm still interested in neither of those things. But I took a trip there kind of on a whim, and I fell in love with the university, the team, the coaches, the resources that they poured into us outside of even just athletics, into our academics and our service, both things that really mattered to me. Could not have been a better place for me. And I very proudly finished my career there as a 12-time NCAA All-American, a 5-time SEC champion, actually the SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly, making me one of the fastest Americans of all time. 2-time Olympic trial qualifier, SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year, SEC Community Service Leader of the Year. But again, just to highlight, lifelong journey. We dealt with COVID in my collegiate career. It hit at the end of my sophomore year, March of 2020. And we were robbed of an NCAA championships in that way. It was about 3 days before we were supposed to leave to compete, and the world shuts down. We're sent home, but we're eventually able to return to campus, start of junior year. This is when, ultimately my junior year, this is when I won my first individual SEC title. University of Kentucky won its first ever SEC title as a team in program history. And I concluded my junior season by placing 7th in the nation, which I was proud of. To be top 8, you're an All-American. It's a pretty high honor, but I didn't go my best time. I knew I was capable of more. And so it was really right then and there, my junior year, where I placed 7th, that I set a goal for my senior year to win a national title, which would of course mean becoming the fastest woman in the country in my respective event. And so, senior year rolls around, and I'm right on pace to achieve this goal. About midway through my senior season, I was ranked 3rd in the nation in the 200 free, trailing the girl in 2nd, a girl I knew very well, by a few 100ths of a second. But the swimmer who was leading the nation, by body lengths, might I add, was a swimmer that none of us had ever heard of before. And this is the first time we became aware of a swimmer named Leah Thomas. Lots of red flags at the time. Keep in mind, we hadn't seen a photo of this person, or else things probably would have been a little more clear. But for all we knew at the time, this was a senior from University of Pennsylvania, which is not a school that has ever historically produced that caliber of swimmer, leading the nation, again, by body lengths in events ranging from the 100 freestyle, which is a sprint event, and all the freestyle events in between, through the mile, which is, of course, long distance. None of it made sense. I'm scratching my head. I'm talking to my coaches. Who is this? We didn't know. And we continued to stay in the dark until an article came out disclosing, very briefly, that Leah Thomas is formerly Will Thomas and swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania before deciding to switch to the women's team. And so when I read this, I was shocked. Naturally, we were all shocked, me and all my teammates. But really, it was kind of like this overwhelming sense of relief. Like, oh, duh, that makes sense, he's a man. And it was at this point I went to look up who Will Thomas was, because I was curious. Was this a lateral movement? Was this someone who went from ranking amongst the best of the men to now continuing to rank amongst the best of the women? Which is, of course, not what we saw. We saw that this was a mediocre man. That's probably generous, actually. We saw that this was a less than average man competing in his rightful category, the men's division, ranking in the 400s and 500s nationally the year prior. To, again, now not just number one, I mean dominating the entire country of women. But again, that's kind of why I say I felt relieved, because I thought the NCAA would see it how I saw it. And again, how my teammates saw it, how my coaches saw it, how my family saw it, how anyone with any amount of brain activity would probably comprehend this. But lo and behold, the NCAA did not. They saw absolutely nothing wrong with this. And so about 3 weeks or so before our national championships in March of 2022, they announced that Thomas's participation in the women's category was a non-negotiable, meaning there was nothing we could do. There were no questions that we could ask as female athletes. There were no concerns that we could raise. We were quite literally told we had to accept this with a smile on our face. And so that first day of competition was the 500 freestyle, which is not an event that I typically do. And so I watched on the side of the pool as Thomas swam to a national title, again beating out Olympians, beating out American record holders, girls we just saw win Olympic medals a few weeks back. These aren't scrubs. These are the best and most accomplished female swimmers this world has ever seen, and he beat them all by body lengths. He became the first man to win a Division I NCAA women's title. Trailblazer. But the second day of competition was the 200 free, which is the event that he and I race each other in. And so we get on the blocks and we dive off and we swim 8 laps of freestyle and touch the wall at the end. And I look up at the scoreboard, and almost impossibly enough, we had gone the exact same time down to the 100th second, meaning that we had just tied, which, number one, is incredibly embarrassing for a 6'4" man. He couldn't even beat me. But two, it's rare, right? You're racing for 1 minute and 40-ish seconds, and not even 1/100th of a second separated us, which you can't tell me that's not divine intervention. But anyways, we get out of the water, and we go behind the awards podium where the NCAA official looks at both Thomas and myself, again, him towering over me, and the official says, "Great job, you two, but you tied, and we don't really account for ties. We only have 1 trophy, and so we're going to give that trophy to Leah. Sorry, Riley, you don't get one." I was so taken aback, naturally, having just competed. I mean, my heart rate was still high, my adrenaline was still pumping, and so the first thing that I thought ended up being the first thing that I said, and the first thought that I had was, isn't this everything that Title IX was passed to prevent from happening. What do you mean you're going to give the trophy to the man and the women's 200 free? To which he didn't have an answer. They didn't give him a script of what to say when someone asked the dreaded question of why. And so he stumbling on his words, we're just doing this in chronological order. That's what he said first. And I said, okay, do you mean alphabetical? Because G comes before T. Otherwise, what are you being chronological about? We went at the exact same time. To which, again, it was really at this point he realized there was no justification. He didn't have a rationale. And I appreciate his honesty. And understand, this is when his face changed. Okay, he looked sad. He sounded sad. I could tell he didn't even believe what he was about to say, but he looked at me and he said, Riley, I am so sorry, but we have been advised as an organization that when photos are being taken, it's crucial that the trophy is in Leah's hands. Again, you can pose with this one, but you have to give yours back. Leah takes the trophy home. You go home empty-handed. End of story. And let me tell you what, that was the moment when we knew all season, we all did, me and all my teammates. We knew the unfair competition was wrong. We knew the locker room scene was wrong. We knew the silencing that we were facing from our universities and the NCAA. We knew all of that was wrong. But it wasn't until this official reduced everything we had worked our entire lives for down to a photo op to validate the feelings and the identity of a man at the expense of our own. That's when I was really no longer willing to wait. And I say wait because that's what I was doing. Call it cowardice. I think I was more so naive because I believed that someone else would say something, right? Surely a coach would defend us. Surely someone within the NCAA, someone with political power, some other swimmer, someone's dad, quite frankly, would come down there and yank this man out of our locker rooms like my dad so desperately wanted to do. I naively believed that someone whose job it was to protect us would protect us. But it was in that moment, on that podium, sharing my placement with a man who stands at least 8 inches taller than me, holding this trophy I know I have to give back. And it was this distinct realization of, Riley, how in the world can you expect someone to stand up for you if you're not even willing to stand up for yourself? That this has to come from you all as women, as female athletes. So that's kind of the unfairness of it. But to briefly touch on the locker room, because if I had to see it, you guys at least have to hear about it. First of all, we were not forewarned that we would be sharing this changing space. There was no prior acknowledgement. There was no ways that we could have made arrangements for ourselves if this was something that we were uncomfortable with. And I'll kind of set the scene. Swimming locker rooms, not really a place of modesty. These suits that you're putting on, your racing suits, they're paper thin, they're skin tight. It takes about 15-20 minutes at least to poke and prod yourself into these suits, and that's 15 to 20 minutes of which you're fully exposed. Have my back turned, right, putting on my suit. Locker rooms, typically, it's a loud place, lots of buzzing and chatter. This is the one meet all year. You get to see your friends from all around the country. So it's a loud environment. Putting on my suit, and all of a sudden the locker room gets dead silent. Have my back turned, so, I kind of stiffen up. And then I hear a man's voice. And instinctually, it was innate for me to cover myself. We all did with our hands or our clothes or our towels. I quickly turned my head around. I had to literally look up because, again, towering over every girl. And there's a man standing at 6'4", 22 years old, taking off his clothes, fully naked, fully intact, fully exposing himself. Again, inches away from where we were simultaneously fully undressed. It's awkward. It's embarrassing, it's uncomfortable, it's humiliating, really. But I think the best way to describe how we felt, again, the overall general consensus of how we felt, I mean, it was an utter violation. It was feelings of betrayal. I loved my university and the NCAA. These were two entities that I trusted, that I believed had my best interest, that I dedicated my life to. And without even a blink of an eye, without even, bare minimum forewarning us, they threw our rights to privacy entirely out of the window. And I alluded to the silencing that we face. But again, I believe it's an important piece in understanding how this issue has transcended beyond the subject matter here. And it really has become an infringement on our First Amendment rights and our freedom of speech, even if it's in the form of self-censorship. I had to go to sensitivity training. Didn't really work, but I had to go. Where my university, they brought in an outside professional, whatever that means, who sat me down, a 21-year-old senior in college at the time, and she taught me how to use she, her pronouns. I had to keep going through this training until they felt like I had been re-educated to their standard, literally the verbiage that they used. We were told, you're gonna lose all your friends if you speak up about this. You'll never get a job because no employer will ever hire you. They're gonna look your name up and they're gonna see that you're a transphobe. And you don't want that, Riley. You wanna go to dental school. Well, no grad school will ever even look at your application if you speak up about this. Oh, Riley, you signed that scholarship, and you signed it willingly, remember that. And when you did, you gave away your rights to your own, to represent yourself in that way. Remember who you represent. It's not you whose name is across your chest and across your cap, it's ours. So Riley, understand, we have already taken your stance for you. Our universities even went as far as to tell us that if we did speak out, and any harm whatsoever were to come towards Thomas's way, whether it was in the form of physical harm, emotional harm, self-inflicted for that matter, they said, then understand you are solely responsible. And that would make you responsible for a potential death, and that would make you a murderer. And you don't want to be a murderer, do you? No, so I suggest you be kind, and I suggest you be inclusive. That's what they told us. Let that really sink in. They told us we would have blood on our hands if we advocated for fair play and privacy and areas of everything, if we even dared question these policies. But believe it or not, that's effective. It works when you're talking to a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-old girls, telling them they're going to be murderers. It works. And that's another piece I could spend the rest of my time talking about. The different tactics, the emotional blackmail, how they intimidate us, which I think is pertinent, and I'll get into it. What we've seen, what this state really has been a leader on surrounding what's going on in the Mountain West Conference with volleyball and what some of those girls have faced. But in short, all of that I just mentioned, in regard to the unfair competition, in regard to the locker room, the free speech aspect, understand that that's not only allowed now, that is required. All of that we face, it's required. Because Title IX, which I alluded to, if you don't know what Title IX is, it is the federal civil rights law that at one point prevented sex-based discrimination within any educational program that receives federal funding. And of course, I strategically say at one point, because Title IX has been abolished under this current administration. They've taken Title IX, enacted 52 years ago, a very brief, half a century, a very brief paragraph. There's only 37 words in its original implementation. They took this little paragraph, created a new proposal that's now almost 500,000 words from 37. That should tell you everything that you need to know. Now 1,577 pages long from a brief paragraph. But in short, what the Biden-Harris administration has done is equate sex with gender identity. Meaning, these words are synonymous, they're the same, they're interchangeable. There are no sex-based protections on public universities anymore. as of August 1st. So to further explain what this means, dorm rooms, you're not entitled as a woman to rooming with a woman. No, if a man, think about it, you go off to college, first time away from home, 17 years old, you're housed with a male who says he's a woman, you get assigned a random roommate. If you even go to your administration and request a new roommate, that's it. Under this new rewrite, you would be guilty and charged with sexual harassment. No, not the man parading around your locker room. No, to President Biden, that's considered brave and inspiring. He said it many times. These are the most brave and inspiring people I've ever seen. But you calling a spade is grounds for sexual harassment. Bathrooms, as I said, locker rooms, changing spaces. If you want to go in the women's one day, the men's next day, by all means, whatever makes you feel happy and included. Academic scholarships, athletic scholarships. Again, the free speech aspect, your speech is now compelled. As a student, as an athlete, as even a professor, as a coach of a university, you are now required to use biologically incorrect but preferred pronouns. And if you don't, again, guilty with sexual harassment. All of this and more. Not just women does this affect either. I think a lot of times we look at this as something that only affects women, which may be more severely, sure. But another part of this new Title IX rewrite that has been changed entirely compared to under the Trump administration is the due process aspect of it, which more adversely affects men. So if a man is accused of some sort of sexual misconduct, a sexual crime, he doesn't have the ability to defend himself in a court of law anymore. That's another implication that I think is important for people to realize. All of this, if you look at this movement, the gender ideology movement, for what it is, understand the premise of it is that we are denying objective truth, biological reality, a biblical truth at that. And the most basic of truth, a truth we have never struggled to understand. In the nearly 250 years we've been established as a country, and certainly much longer than that. That truth being man and woman, the sheer essence of humanity. Hate to break it to every single person in this room, never mind every single person on this planet. You're all here from man and woman, and we're being asked to deny that. That's as if we're being asked to deny that the sky is blue. Or better yet, don't just deny that the sky is blue, say that it's purple, or else. Which if you've read 1984, and don't lie and say you read it out of your own free will, we all had to read it for school. The whole 2 + 2 = 5 mantra, it's what we're living in real time. And it's a slippery slope. And it's a slippery slope that by the hands and feet of our own leaders, we are actively being led down. I could share 100 more stories, more than, just like mine. I mean, essentially the same, because it is the same story every time. Mediocre man becomes a woman to become a record smasher. It's the same story every time. I could tell you hundreds of them. Women losing out on opportunities, women being exploited in locker rooms, women being injured in their sports even. But I feel like it's more beneficial to spend the remainder of my time highlighting why I'm encouraged, and why you should be encouraged, and why we're winning this battle, the war, actually. First and foremost, now 25 states have enacted some sort of fairness in women's sports law, ultimately protecting the categories of sports on the basis of sex. Utah, of course, being one of those states. Not because of your governor, though. I've been very critical of this man, and understandably so, and you all should be too. Because when this bill reached his desk, he vetoed it, citing reasons like compassion, citing reasons like inclusion, or saying this isn't really happening here. You know, this is a solution in search of a problem. We don't have to worry about this in the state of Utah. Yeah, well, tell that to southern Utah. Tell that to Utah State. he has come out now strategically, I believe, given that there is an election right around the corner, and understanding that this was the biggest political mistake that he could have made for his campaign and his political career in vetoing this bill. But now, surrounding the forfeit that both of these universities have gone through with, he has come out and said, look, I applaud these girls, I commend these girls, it takes immense courage and leadership, and I agree it does. Certainly more courage and leadership than he showed when this bill reached his desk. But nonetheless, someone who has been a fierce defender of and champion really for women is Representative Lyman, who's here. So very grateful for that. And his wonderful bride. So I've had the opportunity to spend some time with them, and they're just incredible people. So we really value you and what you stand for and what you've done for the state of Utah. We've now seen 9 states pass some sort of bill traditionally labeled as the Women's Bill of Rights, which merely codifies and defines the word woman in law. I can't even believe we have to do that. But we have a sitting Supreme Court justice who can't even answer the question of what is a woman because she claims she's not a biologist. Which, guess what? I'm not a veterinarian, but I know what a dog is. That's the stupidest thing I've ever So not only is it necessary that we define this word, I would argue that it's urgent. We have seen 26 states ultimately sue the Department of Education and the Biden administration for this illegal administrative rewrite of Title IX. And yes, I said illegal because Joe Biden didn't go through Congress. It didn't go through any of the necessary executive means to get this done. No, he did this with a stroke of a pen. Therefore, 26 states, as I said, have sued, and 26 states, at least temporarily, have won. The Supreme Court has upheld the injunctions that have been issued. I do think it's important and timely and relevant to talk about what's happening in women's volleyball in the Mountain West Conference. There's a school in California, which, of course, it's in California. San Jose State University has allowed a man onto their women's volleyball team, taking a scholarship, taking a roster spot, taking a travel spot when the team travels, from a hardworking, deserving female athlete who signed a scholarship to be able to play, but is being denied that opportunity. But we have seen now, with Utah leading the way, 4 universities decide to forfeit. They say we're not willing to play this team, not because we're intolerant or anything like that. It has nothing to do with how this person identifies. It has everything to do with that this person is a man in reality, and we're concerned for our safety. Southern Utah led the way, then Boise State, then University of Wyoming, most recently Utah State. But again, to touch on what some of these teams have faced in terms of backlash from their administration, these presidents of these universities and athletic directors have told these girls that actually he's at a disadvantage because of how much the hormones that he's having to inject himself. He's at a disadvantage. Telling these girls that they need to educate themselves on the science. You know, you're college students. I thought you were supposed to understand biology. One professor even told one coach even told one of the females on the team, she's a black woman, he told her, this is what your people faced about 30 years ago. He said, how can you live with yourself? That's what these girls are facing. So more universities are in the pipeline to do the exact same thing and forfeit. Which again, you all as a state should be very proud, because like Governor Cox said, it really does take courage and bravery to be the first ones, especially, and that's what Utah has proven itself to be. So I commend them and applaud them. It's a sad day that we have to, because if they even have to vote as a team, if they want to play, it means the adults have failed them. But nonetheless, I do applaud their bravery. What we've spent our time talking about, of course, the gender ideology issue as it pertains to sports. I trust you guys know it's much broader than sports. It's happening in prisons, where male inmates who are convicted of sexual crimes are realizing that the quickest way to get into a woman's prison, which sounds awesome to a rapist, is to say, I'm a woman. They're doing that. I've talked to female inmates who have become impregnated. I've talked to female inmates who now have HIV and AIDS because it's running rampant in male facilities. And now, again, these men are coming in and raping women in female institutions. I've talked to female inmates who, it was their job, they were stationed, one of their duties in the prison was to put up condom dispensers in an all-women's facility. Now, why would they need those contraceptives in an all-women's facility? That's because it's not an all-women's facility. We saw in your neighboring state over here, it's happening in sororities. University of Wyoming allowed a 6'2", 260-pound man into their Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority, living in the sorority house, showering, making incredibly inappropriate and explicit comments to the girls about their bodies and their undergarments. I mean, really sick stuff. These girls were promised sisterhood, and they got the brother that they never wanted. Our language is even being manipulated, right? It's no longer woman or mother. They've changed this in some state statutes to cervix haver, or uterus owner, or menstruator, or bleeder, or chest feeder, or birthing person, birth giver, egg producer, which is my favorite because that's what Admiral Rachel Levine, our wonderful U.S. Assistant Secretary for Health, who happens to be obese, which I just find to be ironic, Secretary for Health, he calls women egg producers, which is hilarious because by his own standard, he would not be a woman. Even how we're referring to ourselves as biological women. Even if you don't realize it, which is how they want it to be, subconsciously, you're subconsciously admitting that there's an unbiological alternative to being a woman or a man or a male or a female or a girl or a boy, and there's not. Again, God created the only distinction that we will ever need when he created male and female. To kids, I mean, they are the true victims in this story, but I digress. Bottom line is that this issue, it shouldn't be a partisan issue, because it's not it was inevitable that it became this political pond that both sides, certainly both sides, utilize to their advantage. But it shouldn't have become that because this isn't a political issue, it's a humanitarian issue. Like I said, unfortunately it has. We saw in the U.S. House, when the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act was introduced, it fell entirely on party lines, meaning 219 Republicans voted in favor of protecting women and girls in sports, and all 203, every last one of them, mothers and fathers of their own young daughters, all 203 Democrats voted in opposition of protecting women and girls in sports. Same thing recently we saw with the Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act. To just clarify what this bill would do, it would just ensure the deportation of anyone who is in this country illegally that is either a pedophile, a rapist, or who has murdered a woman or a child. Seems like common sense. They're here illegally anyways. Let's definitely get the ones who are committing illegal crimes, who are also here illegally, out of this country. No, 158 House Democrats voted in opposition of this bill. But how can that be? They say they're the party of and for women, right? They claim it constantly. Allowing almost 16,000 known, what we know of, rapists into this country illegally doesn't sound very pro-woman to me. The stand that I've taken, it's not one that's against anybody or anything, any person, any group of people. It is a stand that is for something. My stand is very much pro-reality. It is pro-science, what happened to follow the science. It is pro-transparency. It is pro-privacy, pro-safety, pro-equal opportunity, pro-fairness. It is pro-woman. Um, I constantly refer back to this idea of true love. We hear it all the time. It's a cliche phrase, but really understand those two words are synonymous: truth and love. It's loving to say the truth. That's what love is. That's what compassion is. Again, these words have been conflated. It's not compassionate to ask a young girl to undress in front of a man. And it's not inclusive to ask us to smile and step aside and allow these men onto our podiums. I get called brave all the time, which is literally the funniest thing in the world to me. I've said nothing profound. I don't know if you've realized, I've said nothing profound or anything that requires any amount of wisdom at all. I've literally just said there are two sexes, and you can't change your sex. And each sex is deserving of equal opportunity, of privacy, and of safety. So I appreciate you guys. I hope you feel encouraged. We have a big opportunity in 27 days, so exciting stuff going on. But if you guys have any questions, I would be just thrilled to answer them. So thank you.
All right. So we're gonna do a Q&A on this side. If you have a question, please come line up. Otherwise, it's gonna be, auditoriums are rough for a Q&A format like this. So if you have a question, please come line up over here. Couple reminders, this is not your time to do a monologue to Riley Gaines. We know she's great. But yeah, this is a Q&A. And then I'm so sorry to be the fun police, but I do need to remind everybody that this is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we cannot endorse candidates. So any questions around that, we can't do that.
Thank you for standing for what's true and right. Can you hear?
I can hear you.
Anyway, can you talk a little bit about Kim Jones and the icons and the synergies that you are having, and kind of that groundswell of support that's happening because of what they're sort of doing too?
Absolutely. Icons is this group that was formed kind of sporadically, of course, as this issue came on very sporadically to a lot of us, including myself. But it's awesome because it's a nonpartisan group. It's people, actually I would say it's majority of the women who are involved in this organization are what they would call themselves lifelong liberals who have just been let down, disappointed by the Democratic Party, and who are ready to do something to defend women. And so Icons has been fantastic in a lot of these developing stories, breaking these stories, letting the people know what's going on. And they're also the ones who are helping fund and pursue our lawsuit against the NCAA. So myself and now about 20 other NCAA athletes are suing the NCAA. Never something that I wanted to do. Of course, it's a big emotional investment. A lot of time goes into it. It's of course a financial investment. But when I changed my mind, the president of the NCAA, I was at this big conference. Publicly, he released a statement saying he wholeheartedly stood by his decision to allow Leah Thomas and other men to compete in women's sports. Yet privately, when I see him, he says, hey, you keep going. You keep pushing, you keep fighting, as if he's not the one that I'm fighting. And I said, how can you say that to me? He says, well, my hands are tied. I had to release that statement. I said, who's tying your hands? You're the president. He said, well, we don't want to lose any sort of funding, and we don't want to get sued. And I looked at him and I said, I'm suing you then. So that's kind of how that came about. But Icons has been instrumental in on certainly the litigation front, but they are wonderful people. And so, again, if you go to iconswomen.org, I believe, great group, great resources that are provided there. So thank you.
That's working. Hi, I really like you. I'm really nervous. So I have dealt with a lot of backlash not using people's preferred pronouns because I believe there's two sexes, male and female. And I wanted to ask you what your advice was. You know, if I know what's right, but I want to do it in a compassionate way. But I've tried to do that, and so, you know, I definitely understand your side of things and just like how I feel, but it's been hard.
Totally. Well, one, I'm very glad you're here. It is hard. I'll be the first person to admit, when I took that initial leap of faith, it was something that I was I was scared of. I didn't want to be called the names, because I know I'm not those things. They will throw any phobia or ism your way. I've been called them all at this point, which was, again, hard for me at first, until I realized that virtually all of the pushback that I receive is on social media from people who don't put their name to their profile. They don't have a profile picture. I mean, they're just losers, to be honest with you. And it was strictly name calling. There was nothing that dissuaded from what I was actually saying with logic or reasoning or common sense or lived experience or fact or any of that. It was just name calling. So when I realized that, that certainly made it easier. I also had to understand that I'm not going to convince everyone, which, again, was a hard realization for me. Being an athlete, I'm competitive, I'm stubborn, I want everyone to see it my way or the highway. And so it took me a while to come to terms with, there are some people who I will never convince. That's fine. But even if I can convince one person, then it's absolutely worth it. Otherwise, to be totally honest with you, I've learned to take it on the chin. It's just become, I have people who say, how do you do it? Easily. When I know what I'm standing for is again, not just objectively true as a Christian myself, it's biblically true. And knowing that there is an audience of one, and none of these worldly pressures or things matter, that to me personally has given me the ability to stand firm. And so I have lots of friends who disagree with me. I can truthfully say, though, I haven't lost any friends. We disagree on this topic, but we're still able to be cordial and talk about other things. But the support that I've had, I've gained so many friends. So I hope that encourages you. I think it's important what you said, being able to have the conversation while being compassionate, of course, and it's true meaning, the word compassion, and leading with grace always, but never faltering and landing with the truth. So really appreciate that you're here. Thank you.
Hi, hey Riley, how's it going? So I'm asking this question as someone who has a lot of friends who play in different sports at UVU, and I know a lot of the athletes personally. And my question is this: how do you deal with the criticism of being of speaking out against this? Because I've spoken out against this to liberal friends, and I've been called transphobic or ignorant. But I personally know every Division I athlete at UVU, male and female. So, how do you deal with the criticism and transformation, especially as someone who knows personally a lot of the athletes here?
I bet you're at every single game. Am I right?
I was literally named UVU Student Fan of the Year.
You've got a room full of people here who definitely support you. What I will say, what's super unique about what you're saying, and something that's needed, is so much of this battle kind of gets placed on the shoulders of female athletes themselves. And like I said, they're the ones being told they have to vote on it. They're the ones being told that they have to speak up if this is something they don't feel is right. It's super cool to have another student, especially a man, who is willing to kind of defend them. So I think that's incredibly admirable and certainly commendable that you're willing to take that stand. Similarly, it's a worthy cause. And when you know that, the criticism it rolls off. It really does. To me, it's taken a while. Again, it was not something that I felt at the beginning. That's definitely not the case. But now, almost being accustomed to it, and understanding there really is so much more support and people who appreciate the stand that I've taken, that you've taken, because courage begets courage. You being willing to say something will maybe inspire the student fan of the year next year. I don't know if you can win it 2 years in a row. I hope you do.
I did not win it. I did not win it last year. I did not win it last year because I was out of the state for the first semester. But I do think I'm on track to win it this year. I've been to away games. I've been to away games in Salt Lake, Weber State, BYU, and I'm probably going to Arizona and in Northern California for away games.
I think it's amazing. And I will say there's a couple different ways you can handle the criticism. One is kind of, like I said, taking it on the chin, ignoring it, whatever that looks like. I don't like to punch down, but sometimes, especially when it's Keith Olbermann or like Mark Cuban, it's a lot of fun. And I did this before. I testified before Congress and the Senate many times, and most recently testifying before Congress, a Democratic member of the House, Representative Summer Lee from Pennsylvania. In her opening monologue, she said, "I can't believe that I'm forced to sit here and listen to your transphobic bigotry." To which, when it was my turn to read my testimony, I responded with, "If my testimony makes me transphobic, then understand by your own logic, your opening monologue makes you a misogynist," which sent her into a tailspin. He said Marjorie had my back. Marjorie Taylor Greene was in the hearing. Summer Lee, Representative Lee, went on to say, "We want her removed, or her words removed from the record on the grounds of engaging in personalities," which Marjorie Taylor Greene buzzed in, and she said, "I would call a man posing as a woman someone who's engaging in personality." And then it was like the Jerry Springer show. But you can also flip the narrative on them and say, if being pro-woman makes me anti-trans, if that's the logic that we're going to use, then understand that being pro-trans is inherently anti-woman. And what do we call someone who's anti-woman? We call them a misogynist. So, food for thought.
Yeah.
I appreciate you and your support for your university and for the female athletes.
Thank you. Go Wolverines.
Yeah.
I actually have two questions for you, and they're completely different. Number one is, you had this moment where you were dealing with Leah Thomas, and you realized, I've got to do something. And I'd love to hear kind of how you formulated a game plan. I mean, how did you know what to do, or did it just happen, or did you talk to your parents, or, I'd love to hear that. Then question number two, completely different. Here I am in human resources, that's my profession, and we've got this DEI, and it's bad. And all these people are gonna go out and get jobs. What's your advice in how we handle these questions of DEI in the workplace?
Well, to answer this question first, I feel super hopeful because, truthfully, what we're seeing in the corporate world is the free market. It will always prevail. Free market will always 100% it will show what the people want. And what we have seen by companies who embrace these DEI initiatives and campaigns and hiring processes and different things, like, for example, Bud Light, or Target, or Tractor Supply, or even Harley Davidson, or whatever it is, companies you would never expect to fall into to become ideologically captured, really. What we are seeing, even most recently with Toyota, who came out with a bunch of crazy, they were funding, all kinds of crazy stuff. Their stocks are tanking. And so that makes me feel hopeful, though, because it shows that the people are taking action. They're not wanting to put their money or invest or buy products from companies that embrace this ideology. Again, Bud Light lost $27 billion overnight, and their next commercial was a big burly man on a motorcycle with a camo can. It shows you that we the people do have the power, and that should encourage you. And we should utilize that. We should capitalize on that. So that leaves me feeling hopeful. We are starting to see. Again, it's a long process, and I am not going to sit here and say that it's all good and dandy and being handled, because that's how we ultimately got in this position, is by becoming complacent. But I do feel hopeful that we are starting to see some dismantling of the DEI stuff in corporations specifically. I think academia is a little bit behind on that, but nonetheless, I do believe that, again, sanity will prevail. The first question, what my game plan really was, you asked me if I knew what I was doing. No, I still don't know what I'm doing, to be totally honest with you. I knew it was wrong. I knew I wanted to say something, didn't know who I was going to say it to or what I was even going to say. Initially, I reached out to, actually a reporter reached out to me from the Daily Wire. I provided her with comment, I told her about the trophy, I told her about the locker room, all the things, and the story kind of blew up, I think, for a couple reasons. One, because sports resonates with everyone. It's not boring like the environment. Everyone loves sports. And two, it's because people finally saw what was happening from the perspective of an athlete on the pool deck. I had a couple months until I was supposed to go off to dental school, and so I was just using this time, saying yes to every opportunity, just in my own personal capacity, was flying to states, testifying before state legislative bodies. Again, had just no idea what I was doing, but I really do feel like this unworldly sense of, I just feel like God has his hand on me. He provides me with strength and wisdom and protection and direction, and it allows me to do what I do. So we'll see what the future holds, but day by day. So thank you.
My question is, as like a political figure and as a Christian, how do you ensure that you're serving God in your political pursuits without the political pursuit becoming your God?
Really important, because it is easy to get wrapped up in this mentality. I was actually talking about it today. It feels like when the world or our nation is crumbling, we all look to who can save us, right? And all eyes are on Trump right now. And I had a moment where I kind of took a step back, actually watching his rally this past weekend. Elon Musk was there, super cool. He's jumping around like this little excited jelly bean. It's cool. But I saw so many people, influencers who I like a lot, who I follow and repost and amplify and all the things. Lots of influencers and billboards saying, "In Elon we trust." And that really, I saw it and I was like, whoa, this is cultish. That's cultish. We should not ever say that, because there's only one person, one being that we should put our trust in, and that's God. And so I went on to read Psalm 146:3. I encourage all of you to read that verse, and it tells us, man, every single time will fail us, but it is God that will persevere and lead us in the direction that we as Christians need to be led in. And so I have those moments where I do have to check myself, and it's before anything I want to live a Christ-like life. But it's easy to get wrapped up in this idea that the world is crumbling, we're all going to die, putting our tinfoil hats on, which I don't believe is necessarily the reality that we face as Americans. But before anything, reminding myself and looking to God. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm a pre-dental student here at UVU. As I get closer to taking the DAP this next spring, right, I've done my clinical hours, volunteer hours, you know how it goes, all that fun stuff, right?
I know.
The more and more I'm being told your demographic isn't going to get into the schools that you want to get into, especially, University of Utah. My wife wants to have kids, want to be around family and stuff like that when I'm in school, but I'm being told more and more that's not a possibility. It's really discouraging. Is that the reason, or part of the reason why maybe you didn't go to dental school, or what was your experience with that?
So I'll tell you, I took the DAT, got a very high score, scored in the top percentile nationally, which for those of you who don't know, this is a miserable 4-ish hour-long test that covers biology, believe it or not, and chemistry and organic chemistry and math and reading and perceptual ability of how you can fold papers and hole punch them, really weird stuff. But I scored very high on it. I I encourage you to check out DAT Boot Camp. That helped me a lot. I spent lots and lots of time studying. Got interviews all over the country. Went to a lot of these interviews. Even scoring as high as I scored, having all of the extracurriculars that I did. I had the highest humanitarian award at my university, not even just for athletes, I mean for any student at the university. I had the highest humanitarian award you could achieve. I mean, I was a pretty good candidate. I even found myself getting rejected from some colleges. I got into many, but some colleges where I would have never imagined that I wouldn't have been accepted into. I found myself being rejected. And there's a Facebook page of people, and people with much lower scores than me, but different skin colors, were posting, oh, I got accepted, and it makes you wonder, right? Which I think speaks to the importance of meritocracy. Wouldn't you want your dentist to be the best dentist? Point blank, period, end of story. Not the best black dentist, not the best female dentist, not the best any other identity or affiliation or anything like that. I mean, I think that should be, again, across the board something that we can all agree upon, but unfortunately I don't know if that's the way that it is. We've seen what Boeing has done and United Airlines, and saying that we're going to have an initiative to hire 50% of our pilots are going to be females or some minority, something like that. Wouldn't you want your pilot to be able to fly a plane well? That should be the number one qualification, I think. But yes, but you'll be fine. The test is super fun. Very long. Yeah.
Big fan. Big fan. So about a week ago, well, even less than a week ago, honestly, I was told that I was told by my roommate that my roommate is transgender. And I was like, oh, so when's that gonna happen? And he was like, oh, I already did that. So for the past few days, have been grappling with the fact that I've been living with a biological male for the past few months, and I'm very uncomfortable. I am concerned, and I don't know how to handle this. Do you have any advice?
Absolutely. And to clarify, first of all, this is becoming more and more common. It really is. When I describe this scenario up here of like, oh, you could be housed with a male, you're probably all sitting in your seats, like that could never happen. It's happening right here. And it's not unique to just here, okay? This is happening all the time. One, I can't imagine just the betrayal that you feel. I'm sure this is a person who is probably a fine, wonderful person in their personal capacity, but nonetheless, this is a lie. This person and the university administrators lied in putting a male in a woman's dorm. I would encourage you to, one, I believe there are certainly people in this room who can help from an administrative level. I would love to get in contact and see what I can do from my standpoint. I would encourage you to look at some sort of legal action, truthfully, or just inquire what this would look like, because your rights were violated. It's really that simple. And when you go off to college, like all those things they told us, you signed a scholarship. When you go off to college or you sign a scholarship, you don't lose your rights. I believe that. I'm like, oh, I just don't have my First Amendment anymore. Cool, the university has it for me. No, you don't lose your rights, and your rights were entirely violated. So I would love to talk with you and see what I can do to help, because I hate that you have to deal with that, because it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of pressure. I know you don't want to offend or hurt the feelings of your roommate, but nonetheless, you were lied to. Really that simple. So I'd love to connect. Do you want to do, sure. One more? Yes.
Okay. So sorry, guys. This will be our last question.
I feel bad.
No pressure.
Okay. Sorry, I feel bad.
Hi, Riley, you ready?
a volleyball player here at UVU, and so the topic as far as like, you know, San Jose and the player and all that, the forfeiting, very close to home for me. Personally, I have some really good friends and former teammates that I've played with on those teams that had to be matched up against San Jose, and so it's been a really interesting even discussion that we're having in our own locker room here at UVU. And so for me, I guess my question is, I know that a lot of us feel very passionate about this topic, and we can easily share with friends and family or on social media about what is important to us, but how can we get more involved, especially with our platform and with what we have as athletes here on campus? Like, how can we maybe spread more awareness or get more involved to kind of, you know, share and tell people like this is something that's important to us, and we don't want to be violated, we don't ever want to be in that situation, especially here, and why we chose to play, you know, sports here.
Yeah. Well, one, I think it's really important that you guys are, as a team, already having that discussion, because it shows you're being proactive rather than reactive, which is important because so many people, including me, really, you kind of sit on your hands until you are personally affected, and then it's too little, too late, right? And so it's super cool you guys are already kind of having that initial conversation as a team. It's super rare to see unity, so even in any capacity, of course it's hard to get every single person to agree or have the same level of understanding or whatever it is, but to have that unity is really important. I would encourage you to talk to your coaches too. So, you know, if this is something that we have to face, what's going to be our course of action? Because so many schools now are scrambling. They're realizing that they have a game against SJSU or other sports, other teams, and they're having to really work this out internally, and the athletic department is issuing statements that differs from how the girls feel. That happened at University of Nevada recently. So, I encourage you to talk to your coaches. One thing you can do, which I would love to help with, is any athlete who wants to sign on to the lawsuit, always welcome. It doesn't require anything of you other than basically saying, hey, I'm an athlete at the Division I level. We don't want to play a man either. So would love to talk to you about that. But I would say posting about it, talking about it, not shying away from the conversation. So often we kind of avoid it, or we walk on eggshells, or we like to see how the people around us feel before how we say how we feel. Again, I believe that's why we've reached the point where we're at now, where suddenly we're asking ourselves, how did we get here? It's because I think for so long we sat idly by and did nothing, said nothing. So I think even as simple as talking about it is really strong in advancing the narrative that women have had enough. We're done. We're not going to allow this to continue to happen. So all important things to do, but would love to get connected in any future opportunities. Would love to involve female athletes. We're always looking for more who are willing to stand firm. So awesome, yeah. But really appreciate you. And good luck with your season. We have one fan who will be there.
Give it up for Riley Gaines, everyone.